What's the craziest lie someone's told about you? When my principal called me into her office at 3:15 p.m. on a Thursday in October and said the words, "We need to discuss the allegations that you've been running an underground gambling ring from your classroom and accepting student money," I actually laughed out loud because the sentence was so absurd it couldn't possibly be real. But Principal Diana Westbrook wasn't laughing. She was sitting behind her desk with her hands folded, flanked by two people I'd never seen before. A woman in a gray suit holding a legal pad, and a man who introduced himself as Detective Raymond Kowalski from the School Resource Officer Division. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry wasps, and I could feel my shirt starting to stick to my back with sweat I didn't know I was producing. My coffee cup from lunch was still sitting on the desk where I'd left it 3 hours ago, back when my biggest concern was whether I'd have time to grade the American history quizzes before going home. My name is Andrew Sutton. I'm 32 years old, and I've been teaching 11th grade American history at Lincoln High School in Columbus, Ohio, for 6 years. Before that moment in Principal Westbrook's office, my record was spotless. Teacher of the Year nominee twice, sponsor of the History Club, assistant coach for the academic decathlon team. I showed up early, stayed late, wrote detailed lesson plans, and genuinely cared about my students learning something beyond memorizing dates for standardized tests. I'd never even gotten a parking ticket, let alone done anything that would warrant police involvement. My classroom was organized, my grades were submitted on time, and my relationships with colleagues were professional and friendly. I had a reputation as the teacher who actually made history interesting, who brought in primary sources and had students debate historical events from different perspectives. My students liked me because I treated them like thinking human beings instead of test scores. The allegation came from a student named Madison Thornton, a junior in my third period class. Madison was 17, smart but underperforming, the kind of student who could pull straight as if she tried but usually coasted with C's because she didn't turn in homework. She sat in the back row, spent most of class on her phone hidden in her lap, and had a tight circle of friends who were equally disengaged. I'd spoken to her parents twice about her grades, both times getting the same response from her mother that Madison was going through a phase and would turn it around eventually. I'd never had a confrontational relationship with Madison, never written her up for discipline, never done anything beyond the normal teacher-student interactions of asking her to put her phone away and encouraging her to complete assignments. 2 weeks earlier, I'd given her class a pop quiz on the Civil War, and she'd failed it spectacularly, scoring a 23 out of 100. I'd offered her a chance to retake it, but she never showed up for the makeup session. Principal Westbrook slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were printouts of text messages, screenshots of social media posts, and what looked like witness statements typed on school letterhead. "Madison came forward yesterday with information that you've been organizing betting pools on sports games and taking money from students," Westbrook said, her voice carefully neutral. She provided these messages as evidence, along with the names of 5 other students who corroborate her claims. I picked up the first screenshot with hands that had started trembling. It was a group chat conversation from an app called WhatsApp, with my name listed as one of the participants. The messages discussed point spreads for college football games, amounts of money being wagered, and pickup locations for collecting after games. One message, allegedly from me, read, "Buckeyes by 14, $20 minimum, cash only. Drop in the usual spot Monday morning." The phone number attached to my name was close to mine but off by 2 digits. "This isn't me," I said immediately, my voice coming out higher than normal. "I don't have WhatsApp. I've never organized gambling of any kind. This is completely fabricated." Detective Kowalski leaned forward in his chair, pulling out a small notebook. "Mr. Sutton, I need you to understand the seriousness of these allegations. Gambling involving minors is a criminal offense. If you've been accepting money from students, that's theft by deception at minimum, potentially corruption of minors depending on the amounts involved." He paused. "We've already interviewed 6 students who say they participated in your betting pools over the past 2 months. They've provided consistent details about how it worked, where money was dropped off, how you communicated odds." My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. 6 students are lying then, or they've been lied to, but I have never done anything like this. The woman in the gray suit introduced herself as Janet Carmichael, District Legal Counsel, 12 years with the school board. "Mr. Sutton, the district takes these accusations very seriously. While the investigation is ongoing, we're placing you on immediate administrative leave with pay, effective right now. You'll need to surrender your keys, your school laptop, and your building access badge." I stared at the 3 of them, trying to process the fact that my career was imploding based on lies I could prove were false if anyone would just listen. "I want to see the metadata on those screenshots," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I want to see proof that I actually sent those messages, because I didn't. My phone records will show I've never used WhatsApp. My bank records will show I haven't been depositing unusual amounts of cash." Kowalski made a note. "We'll be obtaining warrants for your phone records and financial records as part of the investigation. For now, I need you to provide a formal statement about your whereabouts and activities over the past 2 months, particularly Monday mornings when Madison claims money was being collected." Westbrook stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "Andrew, I've known you for 6 years. I'm hoping this is all a misunderstanding. But until we get to the bottom of it, You can't be in this building or have any contact with students. Janet will walk you to your classroom to collect personal items under supervision. The walk down the hallway to my classroom felt like a death march. Students were still in the building for after-school activities, and several of them saw me being escorted by the district lawyer. I could see the questions forming on their faces, the whispers starting before I'd even turned the corner. In my classroom, I packed my personal books, the photo of my parents on my desk, my coffee mug with the Hamilton quote about not throwing away my shot. Janet watched every item I touched, making notes on her pad. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the framed photo twice. "How long does administrative leave usually last?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Depends on the investigation," Janet said without looking up from her notes. "Could be a week, could be months. You'll continue to receive your salary until there's a determination." I wanted to ask what determination meant, whether my entire career could be destroyed by provably false text messages, but I already knew the answer. In the court of public opinion, accusation equaled guilt. I drove home in a fog, barely remembering the route I'd taken thousands of times. My apartment felt too quiet when I walked in, the silence pressing down like physical weight. I pulled out my phone and stared at it, then opened my settings to confirm what I already knew. No WhatsApp installed. Never had been. I took screenshots of my app history, my download records, everything I could think of that might prove the messages weren't from me. Then I called the only lawyer I knew personally, my college roommate Marcus, who practiced family law in Cleveland. He listened to the whole story without interrupting, and when I finished, he let out a long breath. "Andrew, you need a criminal defense attorney, not me. This is beyond my expertise. But I can tell you right now, you need to stop talking to anyone from the school or the police without representation. Don't answer questions, don't try to explain yourself, don't provide anything voluntarily. They're building a case, and anything you say can be twisted." I hired Linda Pemberton, 43 years old, specialized in criminal defense with a focus on white-collar crimes and false accusations. She charged $350 an hour and required a $10,000 retainer, which cleaned out most of my savings. Our first meeting was the next morning in her downtown office, a modern space with glass walls and expensive furniture that made me feel underdressed in my jeans and polo shirt. Linda listened to my story while taking notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific students or incidents. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Here's what we're dealing with. The school district will conduct its own investigation separate from the police. They have a lower burden of proof, preponderance of evidence instead of beyond reasonable doubt. Even if criminal charges don't stick, the district can still terminate your employment if they believe it's more likely than not that you engaged in inappropriate conduct." She paused. "Have you ever had any conflicts with Madison Thornton? Any reason she'd target you specifically?" I thought about it, running through every interaction I could remember. "She failed a quiz 2 weeks ago. I offered her a retake. She didn't show. Her grades are bad, but that's on her not doing the work. I've never disciplined her beyond normal classroom management, asking her to put her phone away. That kind of thing." Linda made a note. "What about her social circle? The other students who are supposedly corroborating her story?" I pulled out my phone and opened my gradebook app, scrolling through third period. The 5 names in the report are all friends of Madison's. They sit together, they're always on their phones together. 3 of them are failing my class. One of them, Justin Keller, I caught cheating on a test last month and gave him a 0. His parents complained to the principal, but the 0 stood. Linda's eyes sharpened. "So we have a group of students, most of whom are failing your class, one of whom you recently disciplined, all providing coordinated statements about illegal activity they claim you organized. Does that strike you as suspicious?" It did, obviously, but I'd been so focused on defending myself that I hadn't really considered why this was happening. "You think this is retaliation? Madison failed a quiz, Justin got caught cheating, so they invented a gambling ring?" Linda leaned back in her chair. "I think it's a working theory, but we need evidence. We need to prove those WhatsApp messages are fabricated, and we need to undermine the credibility of the accusers." She opened her laptop and pulled up a document. "I'm going to file a motion to preserve all digital evidence, including the phones of the students making accusations. We'll get our own forensic examiner to analyze those screenshots. If they're fake, there will be digital fingerprints proving it. In the meantime, I need you to document everything. Every interaction you've had with these students, every grade you've assigned, every communication with parents. Build me a timeline." Over the next week, I became obsessed with documentation. I pulled email records going back 2 years, printed out every assignment Madison and her friends had submitted or not submitted, created a spreadsheet of their grades with dates and notes about missing work. I requested copies of my phone records from my carrier, showing every call and text I'd made for the past 6 months. I contacted my bank for statements proving no unusual cash deposits. I even pulled security camera footage from a corner store I frequented on Monday mornings, showing I was buying coffee at the exact times Madison claimed I was collecting gambling money in my classroom. The evidence was overwhelming that I hadn't done what they accused me of. But as Linda kept reminding me, evidence only mattered if someone was willing to look at it objectively. The school district's investigation was being conducted by an outside firm called Educational Integrity Solutions, and their investigator was a woman named Rebecca Chambers, 20 years in educational compliance and investigation. She interviewed me in Linda's conference room, recording everything on a digital recorder she placed in the center of the table. Rebecca was professional but cold, asking detailed questions about my teaching methods, my relationships with students, my personal life outside school. "Mr. Sutton, do you socialize with students outside of school activities?" she asked. "No, never," I said. "Do you communicate with students on personal devices or social media?" "Only through the school-approved messaging system for parents and students. I don't friend students on personal social media." "Have you ever accepted money from students for any reason?" "No, I've never even accepted gifts beyond the occasional holiday card or thank you note." Rebecca made notes without showing any reaction. "The students claim you used a burner phone to communicate about gambling activities. Do you own any phones beyond your primary cell phone?" "No, just the one phone." She asked me about specific football games, whether I'd watched them, whether I'd discussed them with students. I explained that I mentioned current events sometimes in class to make connections to historical topics, and yes, I'd probably mentioned the Ohio State game in passing because half my students wore Buckeyes gear. But I'd never discussed betting, never mentioned point spreads, never done anything beyond casual conversation about sports. Rebecca's expression never changed. She asked the same questions multiple ways, trying to catch inconsistencies, looking for any crack in my story. After 2 hours, she packed up her recorder and notes. "We'll be completing our investigation within the next 2 weeks. You'll receive a written report of findings and recommended actions." Linda walked her out, then came back and sat down across from me. "She's not on your side," Linda said bluntly. "The district hired her to find something. Even if she doesn't find evidence of gambling, she'll find something else to justify your suspension. That's how these things work." The police investigation was moving faster. Detective Kowalski executed a search warrant on my apartment on a Wednesday morning, showing up with 3 other officers and a forensics tech who photographed everything and bagged my laptop, my tablet, and my phone as evidence. They searched my closet, my drawers, my bookshelves, looking for cash or betting slips or anything that would support Madison's claims. I watched them tear apart my home while Linda stood beside me, occasionally reminding me not to volunteer information. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. No cash beyond the $60 in my wallet, no burner phones, no notebooks with betting records, nothing. After 3 hours, they left with my electronics and a receipt for seized property. "How long until I get those back?" I asked Linda. "Months, probably," she said. "They'll send them to a forensic lab and labs are backed up. Could be 6 months before they finish analysis." That same week, the story leaked to local media. A reporter from the Columbus Dispatch called my cell phone, which I no longer had since the police had seized it, then showed up at my apartment building. I watched from my window as he knocked on doors, trying to find neighbors who'd talk about me. The next day, there was a story on the paper's website. Lincoln High teacher under investigation for alleged student gambling ring. My name wasn't mentioned because I hadn't been charged with anything, but everyone who read it would know exactly who they were talking about. The comment section filled up within hours. People calling for my arrest, calling me a predator, demanding the school fire me immediately. Never mind that I hadn't been convicted of anything, hadn't even been charged. The accusation was enough to destroy my reputation completely. Parents started calling the school demanding I be removed. The teachers' union issued a statement supporting due process, but it was drowned out by the mob demanding blood. I stopped leaving my apartment except for meetings with Linda. I had groceries delivered, ignored calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and spent hours every day obsessively reading everything written about my case online. The school's parent Facebook group was a nightmare of speculation and judgment. Some parents defended me, saying I'd been a good teacher to their kids and deserved the presumption of innocence. But they were shouted down by parents who said they'd always known something was off about me, that I was too friendly with students, that where there's smoke, there's fire. One parent claimed I'd made her daughter uncomfortable 2 years ago, though she provided no details and hadn't reported it at the time. The rumors grew more elaborate with each retelling. By the end of the week, some people were claiming I'd been running a full casino from my classroom, that I'd corrupted dozens of students, that I'd threatened kids who didn't pay their debts. Linda filed motions demanding the digital forensic analysis of the WhatsApp screenshots. The district fought it, claiming student privacy, but the judge sided with us and ordered the evidence preserved and examined by a neutral third party. The forensic examiner, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, 26 years in digital forensics and expert witness testimony in over 200 cases, took possession of Madison's phone and the phones of the 5 students who'd corroborated her story. Her analysis took 3 weeks, and when the report came back, it was 63 pages of technical detail that boiled down to one critical finding. The WhatsApp screenshots had been created using a fake conversation generator website called fakemessenger.com, http://fakemessenger.com. The metadata proved the images were generated on October 2nd, 2 days before Madison made her report to Principal Westbrook. The phone number listed as mine in the screenshots had never actually sent those messages because they'd never been real messages at all. They were completely fabricated images created to look like authentic conversations. Linda called me the moment she got the report, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "We've got them. The screenshots are fake, provably fake, and the forensic evidence is unimpeachable. Dr. Nguyen's testimony will destroy the entire case." I felt my knees go weak with relief, and I had to sit down on my kitchen floor. So this is over? They'll drop everything? The criminal investigation, yes. Kowalski will have to close his case because there's no evidence of a crime. The school district investigation is trickier, but with this evidence, they'll have a hard time justifying your termination. She paused. But Andrew, we need to talk about what comes next. These students committed a serious crime. Filing a false police report, defamation, conspiracy. You have grounds to pursue civil and potentially criminal charges against them. I sat there on my kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, thinking about Madison and Justin and the others who'd coordinated this lie. Part of me wanted to see them punished, wanted them to face consequences for nearly destroying my life. But another part of me, the teacher part, wondered what had happened to make them think this was acceptable. Linda sent the forensic report to Detective Kowalski, to the school district, and to the district attorney's office. The response was swift. Kowalski called me directly, which Linda had told him not to do, and left a voicemail apologizing for the investigation and confirming the case was closed. The district attorney's office issued a statement declining to prosecute me for any charges related to gambling or corruption of minors. Rebecca Chambers' investigative report, which had been expected to recommend my termination, was suddenly delayed pending additional review of new evidence. Principal Westbrook called Linda requesting a meeting to discuss my return to work. Everything that had been moving in one direction reversed almost overnight. But the damage was already done. My name had been in the news. Parents thought I was a criminal. Students had heard the rumors. Even if I was cleared, I'd never teach at Lincoln High again without a cloud of suspicion following me. The meeting with the school district was scheduled for a Monday morning in the district administration building. I sat across from Westbrook, the superintendent Dr. Raymond Foster, Janet Carmichael, and 2 school board members I didn't recognize. Linda sat beside me with 3 copies of Dr. Nguyen's forensic report in a folder on the table in front of her. Westbrook started the meeting by acknowledging that new evidence had come to light that raised questions about the original allegations. Questions, like the evidence hadn't completely proven the allegations were fabricated lies. Dr. Foster cleared his throat and said they were prepared to lift my administrative leave immediately and reinstate me to my teaching position, effective the next day. However, he continued, given the circumstances and the public nature of this situation, we believe it might be in everyone's best interest to consider alternative arrangements, perhaps a transfer to another school in the district or a temporary reassignment to curriculum development. Linda's expression didn't change. My client was falsely accused of criminal conduct by students who fabricated evidence and coordinated false testimony. The forensic evidence proves conclusively that he did nothing wrong. Now you're suggesting he should be punished anyway by being transferred away from a school where he's taught successfully for 6 years? Janet Carmichael jumped in. It's not punishment. It's protecting Mr. Sutton. There's been significant media attention, and emotions in the parent community are running high. We're concerned about his safety and his ability to effectively teach in this environment. I felt the anger that had been building for weeks finally break through. You're concerned about my safety? Where was that concern when you suspended me based on screenshots that anyone with basic internet literacy could have identified as fake? Where was that concern when you let me be vilified in the press while you conducted your investigation? Now you want to hide me away in some basement office because it's easier than admitting you made a mistake? Dr. Foster's face reddened. Mr. Sutton, I understand you're upset, but we followed proper protocol. When serious allegations are made, we have an obligation to investigate. You had an obligation to investigate the allegations critically, Linda said, pulling out a second folder. But let me help you understand what actually happened here. These 6 students, all of whom were failing Mr. Sutton's class or had been disciplined by him, coordinated a false accusation using fabricated evidence they created on a website designed for making fake screenshots. They provided statements that aligned because they rehearsed them together. And instead of questioning why 6 underperforming students would suddenly come forward with perfectly coordinated stories, you accepted their claims at face value and destroyed my client's reputation. She slid the folder across the table. This is a notice of our intent to file a civil lawsuit against the district for defamation, negligent investigation, and violation of due process rights. We're also filing complaints with the State Education Board regarding the conduct of your investigation. The room went silent. One of the school board members, a woman I recognized from news coverage, spoke up. Mr. Sutton, what would it take for you to feel that justice has been served here? I'd thought about that question for weeks. I want my job back, at Lincoln High, with a public statement from the district clearing my name completely. I want an investigation into why 6 students were able to coordinate a false accusation without any adult questioning it. And I want assurances that the students face appropriate consequences for what they did. Dr. Foster and Westbrook exchanged glances. We can restore you to your position, Foster said carefully. We can issue a statement clarifying that the investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing. But the question of student discipline is complicated. They're minors, and there are legal protections. They're old enough to coordinate a conspiracy to destroy someone's career, I interrupted. They're old enough to face consequences. The meeting ended with a tentative agreement. I would be reinstated effective immediately, with full back pay for the time I'd been on leave. The district would issue a public statement clearing my name and acknowledging the allegations were unfounded. In exchange, I would hold off on filing the lawsuit for 60 days while they conducted an investigation into the student's conduct. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. As Linda and I walked out of the building, she turned to me and said, "The statement won't undo the damage to your reputation. You know that, right? People will still remember the accusations more than the exoneration." I knew. I'd already accepted that teaching at Lincoln High might not be sustainable long-term, regardless of what the district said officially. But I wasn't going to let them force me out quietly, and I wasn't going to let Madison and her friends walk away without consequences. The district's statement was posted on their website and sent to local media outlets that afternoon. Following a thorough investigation, Lincoln High School has determined that allegations of inappropriate conduct by teacher Andrew Sutton were unfounded. Mr. Sutton has been fully cleared of all accusations and will return to his teaching duties immediately. The district regrets any disruption this matter caused and remains committed to fair and thorough investigative processes. It was bureaucratic and bland, but it was official. The Dispatch ran a small follow-up story buried on page 8 of the Metro section. The parent Facebook group barely acknowledged it. In the court of public opinion, I was still guilty, just not officially convicted. I prepared to return to school the next day, laying out my clothes like I was preparing for battle, because that's what it felt like. Walking into Lincoln High that Wednesday morning felt surreal. Students stared at me in the hallways, whispering to each other. Some teachers greeted me warmly, telling me they'd never believed the accusations. Others avoided eye contact, hurrying past like I had a contagious disease. My classroom had been cleaned out during my absence, all my personal items boxed and stored in the main office. I spent first period reorganizing my desk, hanging my posters back on the walls, trying to recreate the space that had felt like home for 6 years. Second period was my planning period, which I spent reviewing the lesson plans the substitute had followed and trying to figure out where my students were in the curriculum. Third period was when Madison and her friends would walk through my door, and I had no idea how to handle that. At 10:22, the bell rang and students started filing in. I watched the door, waiting, my heart pounding against my ribs. Madison walked in with Justin and 2 of the others who'd corroborated her story. They looked shocked to see me standing there, their faces going pale. Madison actually stopped in the doorway, causing the student behind her to bump into her back. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then she walked to her usual seat in the back, pulled out her phone, and pretended I didn't exist. I taught that class on autopilot, covering Reconstruction with a voice that didn't sound like mine. The room was silent in a way it had never been before, students too uncomfortable to even whisper to each other. When the bell rang, releasing them to lunch, Madison and her group rushed out without looking at me. I sat at my desk, hands shaking, wondering how I was supposed to continue teaching students who'd tried to destroy me. The investigation into the students' conduct was being handled by Dr. Foster personally, which didn't inspire confidence. A week after my return, he called me into his office to discuss findings. "We've interviewed all 6 students involved," he said, looking uncomfortable. Madison admits that she created the screenshots, but claims she did it as a joke that got out of hand. She says she never intended for it to become a formal investigation. I stared at him in disbelief. A joke? She provided false testimony to police. She coordinated with 5 other students to file false reports. That's not a joke, that's a crime. Foster held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I understand your anger, Andrew. What they did was serious. We're recommending a 10-day suspension for all 6 students and mandatory counseling. They'll also be required to write formal apologies to you." 10 days, I repeated. "They almost destroyed my career, my reputation, my entire life. And you're giving them 10 days suspension?" Foster's expression hardened. "They're minors. We have to consider their futures as well. A criminal record could impact college admissions, scholarship opportunities. And what about my future? What about the impact on my career?" I left Foster's office and called Linda immediately. "They're giving them 10-day suspensions. That's it. No criminal charges, no real consequences." Linda was quiet for a moment. "The district attorney could still file charges, but they typically defer to parents in cases involving minors. If the parents refuse to cooperate, it makes prosecution difficult." She paused. "Andrew, we can still pursue the civil lawsuit. We can go after the students and their parents for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy. The burden of proof is lower in civil court." I thought about it. Lawsuits took years and cost money I didn't have, but letting them walk away felt like admitting what they'd done was acceptable. "Let's do it," I said. "File the lawsuit." The lawsuit named all 6 students and their parents as defendants, seeking $500,000 in damages for defamation, emotional distress, and lost wages. Linda filed it in county court on a Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, the story was back in the news. "Teacher sues students who accused him of running gambling ring," read the Dispatch headline. The comment sections exploded again, this time divided between people saying I was right to hold them accountable and people saying I was a vindictive adult punishing children. Madison's mother, Carol Thornton, gave an interview to a local TV station calling me a bully who was targeting her daughter for making a mistake. "She's 17 years old," Carol said, crying into the camera. "She admitted what she did was wrong. But Mr. Sutton is trying to ruin her life with this lawsuit. What kind of teacher does that?" The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news, painting me as the villain in a story where I was the victim. The lawsuit crawled through the court system with agonizing slowness. Discovery requests, depositions, motions to dismiss, motions for summary judgment. Linda warned me it could take 2 years to get to trial, and that's if the defendants didn't drag it out even longer. Meanwhile, I had to keep teaching at Lincoln High, walking past students who'd testified against me, eating lunch in a faculty lounge where half the teachers thought I should have just let it go. My third period class became a daily exercise in tension. Madison and her friends sat in the back, barely participating, while the rest of the students tried to pretend everything was normal. I taught my lessons, graded papers, sponsored the history club, and went home to my apartment where I'd sit alone wondering when this nightmare would actually end. 6 months into the lawsuit, Madison's family filed for bankruptcy. Their attorney claimed the legal fees had devastated them financially and they couldn't afford to continue defending against my claims. Linda explained that bankruptcy might discharge some of the damages if we won, but wouldn't stop the case from moving forward. 2 of the other families settled out of court, paying $15,000 each and requiring their children to write formal apologies and complete community service. The apologies were generic and clearly lawyer-written, but having them in hand felt like something. The remaining families, including the Thorntons, continued fighting. Justin Keller's parents hired an aggressive attorney who filed counterclaims, alleging I'd created a hostile educational environment and intentionally failed their son in retaliation. It was absurd, easily disproven by my grade records, but it added months to the timeline and thousands in legal fees. The case finally went to trial 14 months after I filed it. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with uncomfortable benches and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Madison took the stand looking young and scared, wearing a modest dress and minimal makeup clearly chosen to make her look sympathetic. Linda questioned her for 3 hours, walking through every detail of how she'd created the fake screenshots, how she'd recruited her friends to corroborate the story, how she'd known exactly what she was doing when she reported me to Principal Westbrook. "You knew this accusation could destroy Mr. Sutton's career, didn't you?" Linda asked. "I guess," Madison mumbled. "You knew that teachers accused of inappropriate conduct with students are usually fired, even if the accusations are false, correct?" "I didn't think about it that much. But you did think about it enough to coordinate your story with 5 other students, to create fake evidence, to provide detailed statements to investigators?" Madison's attorney objected, but the judge allowed the question. "I was mad about my grade," Madison finally admitted. "I thought if I got him in trouble, maybe they'd change my grade or something." The jury deliberated for 6 hours and came back with a verdict in my favor on all counts. They awarded me $175,000 in damages, split between the remaining defendants. It was less than I'd asked for, but more than I'd expected. As the judge read the verdict, I watched Madison's mother break down crying in the gallery. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and hollowed out, and like I'd won a battle but lost something bigger in the process. The Dispatch ran another story, this time with the headline, "Teacher Wins Defamation Lawsuit Against Students Who Made False Accusations." The comments were still brutal, people calling me petty for going after teenagers, others saying I was right to hold them accountable. I stopped reading them after the first 50. I taught at Lincoln High for 1 more semester after the trial, finishing out the school year. Then I resigned and took a job at a private school in Cleveland, 40 minutes from Columbus, teaching smaller classes to students whose parents paid $25,000 a year for the privilege. It wasn't what I'd envisioned for my career, but it was a fresh start, somewhere my name wasn't associated with scandal. The settlement money covered my legal fees with enough left over to put a down payment on a small house. Madison graduated from Lincoln High and enrolled in community college, according to mutual acquaintances who still lived in Columbus. Justin transferred to a different high school after the verdict. The other students involved scattered to different schools and different lives. 3 years later, I got a letter in the mail forwarded from my old address. It was from Madison, handwritten on lined notebook paper. "Mr. Sutton," it read, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. I've been in therapy for a while now, and my therapist suggested I write this even though you might not read it. What I did to you was wrong. Not just wrong like a mistake, but wrong like evil. I was angry and immature, and I didn't think about you as a real person with a real life. I just saw you as someone who gave me a bad grade. I destroyed your reputation and nearly ruined your career because I failed a quiz. I can't take it back, and I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry. I think about what I did all the time, and I hate myself for it. I hope you've been able to move on and that teaching somewhere new is going well. You were actually a good teacher, even though I never appreciated it at the time. Madison." I read the letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer. I never responded. Some things can't be fixed with apologies, no matter how sincere. The lies she told about me changed my life permanently, forced me to relocate, cost me tens of thousands in legal fees, and made me question whether I could trust any student ever again. Her regret didn't undo any of that, but it was something, knowing she understood what she'd done. I still teach American history, just in a different building with different students who don't know my story unless they Google my name and find the old articles. I'm good at what I do, passionate about helping young people think critically about the past and how it shapes the present. But I'm also more guarded now, more careful about every interaction, more aware that even innocent actions can be twisted into weapons by someone with bad intentions. The craziest lie someone told about me cost me my reputation, my peace of mind, and my faith that being a good person would protect me from false accusations. But it didn't destroy me. I'm still here, still teaching, still trying to make a difference. That's something they couldn't take away, no matter how hard they tried. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.